Throughout my roughly 14-year gaming career, both the metroidvania and 2D platformer genres rarely caught my attention. The first platformer I ever remember falling in love with was actually Rayman Legends, possibly the best thing Ubisoft has ever produced by the way, and as anyone with any semblance of game knowledge would know, that is still very much a modern title. It took my completion of Ori and the Blind Forest last year to realise, okay, maybe these kinds of games are good. Since then, I've gotten really into a game called Dead Cells, a title that's an elegant fusion between the roguelike and metroidvania genres, with great combat and great per run variety due to its compelling procedural generation systems. However, neither of these two titles fully embrace their classic influences. Neither of these two titles accurately showcase the metroidvania genre in all its glory. Enter Hollow Knight. Holy shit, if I had a rating system, I would give this game a pasta out of pasta. It's just that damn good. Fuck. This title soared above and beyond my expectations. It presented a world full of mystery that is just a delight to explore and uncover, combat and platforming mechanics that insist on becoming more complex as the game moves forward at a very impressive pace. And all of this tied together with an inspiring and endearing art direction like no other. Hollow Knight is a masterpiece, and here's why. From beginning to end, Hollow Knight presents to the player a distinct, beautiful hand-drawn art style that separates itself from similar titles with soft, rounded edges that flourish throughout its environments. It still manages to pack in a great deal of detail too. The backgrounds and foreground, while not as full of life as something out of Ori, do a very sufficient job at making the world feel realised, and making Hollow Knight's environments feel like an actual space rather than just a 2D plane. The colour work woven into Hollow Knight's visuals is very intelligent. It does a great job at making the world feel varied and fresh with each new area discovered, because when you first start the game, it's actually just a handful of greys and dark imposing blues that really set the tone of the world you find yourself in. I find starting the games with colours like this is genius, as you first find the world hostile and hopeless, but as you progress through the game's many areas, you start to appreciate the beauty of Hollow Knight's complex world as you're exposed to the greens of Greenpath, the pale pinks of Crystal Peak, and the faint blue hue coming from the rain in the City of Tears. Everything just pretty much fits in Hollow Knight too. Pretty much every character you encounter is some form of bug, which means the protagonists, NPCs and enemies you meet along the way fit so organically into their environment with their round, minimalistic sketches. The simplicity of the protagonist's design excellently reflects the attitude a player might have when beginning the game too. You're a small being who seems helpless in the face of a huge and dangerous world, but with the white glow of your mask, you are hopeful that going against the odds will result in prosperity for yourself and the kingdom of Hallownest. Speaking of going against the odds, the enemy design in Hollow Knight is fantastic. Adversaries boast their own varied designs that efficiently communicate to the player what that enemy does. Some designs are intentionally similar to others in order to indicate that they are from the same faction of society that once existed in Hallownest. For instance, there's the city guards, the ordinary people that lived in that city, and even Mantis villagers. The animation work for these characters is well handled too. It's no Cuphead, but nothing really is. Hollow Knight's animations get a solid job done though, and at times they're very much beautiful to witness when combined with the equally beautiful art direction. Most animations have just the right amount of telegraphing to feel both fair and challenging, but where animation really shines, as well as many other aspects of this game, is in the boss fights, which we can talk about a bit later. Overall, I really like the animation here. Another thing I really love about Hollow Knight is how it seamlessly blends both visuals and sound together in order to present itself to the player in an atmospherically unique way. Sound design is great here. From the very first area, danger is presented to you through the scuttling of insects or the hum of their wings, invisible to your plane of view. Usually you're aware of an enemy's presence before you even see them, and the stereo imaging here helps achieve this to a great extent. Effects such as reverb are used appropriately according to the types of areas you're in, and do a really great job of building ambience where it's needed. One thing I'll never forget about Hollow Knight's sound design though, is the combat effects. Every blow exchanged has real impact, especially when the protagonist is hit and all other sound gets drowned out by the collision between the enemy's weapon and you. It conveys real danger to the player and threatens their belief that they have the upper hand in battle. There's music in Hollow Knight too, and it's great. It isn't phenomenal, but the songwriting on display here is beyond competent. The most infectious thing about this game's music, in a good way, is its melodies. They're so damn good that you'll probably be playing them in your head long after you've set the game down after a session. Melody work here is especially impressive as you discover that many tracks contain leitmotifs that call back to all the themes that you've heard earlier in the game. Ambient music like this is one of the cornerstones of Hollow Knight's atmosphere and tone. It prods the player to explore the unknown, it fills them with doubt, and it also gives them respite. I love the ambient music in this game. The combat music is very good too, and the great melody writing is consistent, but my one gripe about some of the combat music and the boss tracks is that there isn't much scope in their instrumental layering. A lot of the tracks in this category could have been so much better had they just been a tad more complex. However, I am nitpicking here, so yeah. Really solid soundtrack overall, and one that I'd even listen to outside of the game. So, with a combination of all these things, Hollow Knight definitely commits to a particular tone and delivery of presentation. One which plays on the duality between the beauty of discovery and the harshness of Hallownest's reality. Hollow Knight handles gameplay in many compelling ways, most of which I think are exceptional. However, two things really stuck out to me as I was playing through this game. On one hand, I found myself saying, damn, this game has really good level design. And on the other, I was saying, damn, this game has really great world design. Note that I differentiate the two. The latter involves how the game's overall world is designed to both give freedom to the player while also funneling them to the content that they are capable of both reaching and conquering. The world design of Hollow Knight fascinates me because it first appears as a fairly linear affair. You explore the crossroads, kill the boss, and then you come across a new power that allows you to travel to the next area. But Hollow Knight doesn't stop there. You keep discovering more and more gameplay mechanics. You begin to realize that the double jump you just unlocked allows you to discover new routes and sections to earlier levels that can lead to new levels, which then lead to new routes to both older levels and newer levels. It was near my 12-hour mark where I first discovered that double jump ability. And that's not even the only new traversal mechanic you unlock. This game doesn't slow down unless you forcibly make it slow down. The way that Hollow Knight's world all fits together is just mesmerizing too. You know you made a great metroidvania when your player finds joy in opening up the map and navigating the world. You know you made a great metroidvania world when it appears as both a complex space and one that is also believable and very much comprehensible. I've seen some people complain about how your map works in Hollow Knight though. Upon entering a new area, you have to search for a vendor that sells you the map for that area. As you could probably guess, I really like this feature, and I don't really understand where these complaints are coming from. It's a great idea because it encourages the player to pay attention to their surroundings and the layout of the level. It teaches them to be observant. This feature can even sometimes build upon atmosphere, making it feel like you are truly lost in a sometimes dark and dangerous place, to the extent where the discovery of the map vendor in that same area comes with a sigh of relief, knowing that you can now explore the level freely without feeling restricted by your lack of knowledge. The self-contained level design of Hollow Knight is a big part of why so much of the world design works so well. After all, these are the levels that take into account the interconnected nature of the larger world. However, there's still some really good, grounded and focused level design here. much of which involves cool, unique ideas that a level explores in regard to both enemy design and platforming, while also throwing in things like surprising shortcuts so you can easily get back to benches that you encounter throughout the game as a sort of checkpoint system. These benches are appropriately placed throughout these levels too, most of which serve as a great hub for exploration of an area or a preparation zone for bosses. And the bosses? They're mostly fantastic. While some of them are just humanoid bugs, they all manage to feel distinct in both their designs and movesets. While there are a couple duds in regards to difficulty spiking, mainly the fucking stupid Watcher Knights, most bosses are fair game as you encounter them because Hollow Knight's combat is very skill based. It's constructed in a way that lets you beat these bosses without numerous health upgrades or soul meter enhancements. You can get by just fine reading telegraphs and training your reactions well. Boss fights definitely bring out the best of Hollow Knight's combat mechanics too, because at first the game seems rather simple. You distance yourself away from the enemy to avoid damage, and you counterattack with the only attack button that you have. But if you're anything like me, you may begin to be surprised about the amount of depth in Hollow Knight's combat. It was a couple hours before I realised I even had an upward directional attack, but it took me even longer to realise that you could take advantage of the overly responsive aerial movement to also pull off a downward directional attack that actually bounces you off enemies, meaning if your enemy has no upward attacks to counter your downward, you could essentially balance and time your bounces to keep hitting them repeatedly until death. Fortunately, most enemies compensate for this. It's not until a few hours into the game that you discover your first dodge mechanic too. Yes, I said first. This not only greatly enhances your combat capability, but it also allows access to new areas while making navigation much more fluid in general. There's also a soul healing mechanic that I really enjoyed in this game. Basically, you fill up your soul meter by hitting enemies while searching amongst combat or not, for an opportunity to go through a delayed animation that leaves you vulnerable as you refill your HP. There are spells and the charm perk system that actually offers pretty great variety too, but I think you get the point. There is a lot at work here that gets woven together seamlessly as you get better at Hollow Knight. Not only does the protagonist level up, but you as a player levels up also. It's awesome stuff. Take a look at this. I make this comparison for good reason. Out of pretty much any singular aspect of Hollow Knight, the story and world building, I think, takes the most inspiration from a little game called Dark Souls. For the very first area in the game that's deemed as safe, its atmosphere is drenched in an awful lot of sadness and hopelessness. It immediately communicates to the player that something is definitely awry in this kingdom, but what? Well, the story of Hollow Knight doesn't exactly tell you. It encourages the player to draw their own conclusions from the environmental storytelling and the further questions that it raises. Unfortunately, in Hollow Knight's case, I have a problem with this approach. There's no real substance that you can find in Hollow Knight's world outside of the environmental storytelling, which at points is done well, but it never truly fleshes out the story of Hallownest's past, which seems to me what Hollow Knight is trying to tell us about. It never really gives us hard answers about how the world came to be how it is, which some may see as a positive, but I think telling a vague story where the answers aren't really hidden because they aren't really there at all is pointless. Compare this to, say, Dark Souls, where every item in your inventory has a description telling you of both its use and context. Layer that with incredible environmental storytelling and NPC dialogue, and you can really piece together the story of Lordran and how everything fits together. Hollow Knight does do NPC interactions well, but they serve as more of a present purpose for your own journey. This is where the good stuff is, especially interactions with characters such as Hornet and Quirrell, mainly because these two actually have interesting things to say about the world, as well as their purpose within it. Most NPCs in this game have their own ambitions and or their own unique characteristics, and few feel out of place or pointless. There's a lot of variety when regarding characters, and I really like most of them. Unfortunately, there isn't much else really to say about the narrative of Hollow Knight without spoiling a bunch of stuff. And seeing as this is a video that isn't a discussion like my Nier Automata one, that's something that I want to avoid doing. Despite my problems with Hollow Knight's story, I still love the game. I think it's as close to perfect that a $15 game can get, and when you look at the content to price ratio of this game, the consistency of that content, and the fact that the developer known as Team Cherry are still releasing free content for it, I truly believe that Hollow Knight is worthy of being titled a masterpiece.